Today on the Extreme Channel, we're reviewing this $3,000 giant Transformer statue. That's right, it's the iconic Decepticon Devastator. And as you can see, I'm sure the thoughts are running through your mind. My God, this is massive. Where are you going to put it? I didn't think it was going to be that big. So let's just get it out of our system now.
That's what she said.
Hey, that's what she said.
That's what she said. That's what she said. That's what she said.
That's what she said.
Oh no! That's what she said.
That's what she said.
That's what she said!
To give back to you guys, the Extreme Channel is giving away this giant Goro statue from PCS for our 20,000 sub giveaway. If you want to know how to win this, I'll tell you a little bit later in this video. Hey, I really appreciate you tuning in. As I said, today we're looking at this giant piece from Imaginarium Arts. This is Devastator, and I think this is officially the largest statue in my collection. That is why kind of the camera is really off today, and we're doing a standing review. And I have pants on because there's a bunch of people staying at my house. Now, as we do the in-depth review on this piece today, we're not going to ask does size matter. We're going to ask does size cover up a lot of other sins? Because there are definitely some issues with this statue, at least mine in particular, maybe some of the other ones they made. But there's also some really amazing things. Now before we get started, as soon as I'm done filming this, I am actually disassembling him and moving him over to the Transformer side of the man cave because I'm filming another room tour tomorrow. So you should see that launch sometime in the next week. So make sure you've not only liked this video, but you've subscribed to the channel and you've hit that bell notification for all. But there's a lot to cover on him, so let's just jump right in. Now, if you're unfamiliar who Devastator is a Decepticon, so he's a bad guy. He runs with Megatron and Starscream, and he doesn't like Optimus Prime or Bumblebee. And when I say he, I should really say they, because Devastator is actually 5 different Transformers combined. That's why he was such a favorite, at least for me growing up, because I did have the Hasbro toy, which was probably about 1/5 this size, but still one of my favorite Transformer toys. Now, Imaginarium Arts has brought this Generation 1 giant Devastator statue, and I don't know what the scale on this is, but I would speculate it's about 1/10 or 1/12, so probably 10 or 12 times smaller than the real version. We'll do dimensions during design. But first we're going to start with concept. In concept with this piece, they did give him a little bit of action, which you typically don't see in a Transformer. Check out what I'm talking about. So on this base, we'll talk more about it in Paint and Sculpt, but it's a construction site, or maybe it's, a little bit of Cybertron, whether they're on Cybertron or they're on Earth, and some Cybertrons coming out. Some pretty cool stuff. You see some remnants of maybe another Transformer below. And as you move up, you see his 2 legs. His 2 legs are actually made up of Scrapper and Mixmaster. Those are the Transformers that actually become his legs. And that would have to suck. If I'm going to be a Transformer, I'd probably want to be more of, the chest or the head or something of that nature. However, he is slightly moving, so he's kind of walking or lunging forward. And as you move up, one of the things I really like about this, again, we'll talk about it during Paint and Sculpt, is you see the true transformation of these construction vehicles or Constructicons into an actual robot, which is pretty neat. Then you move up to his torso. In his torso, you actually have Long Haul. Long Haul actually creates that part of it. He was previously a crane. And again, you see a lot of what we talked about on the side. And one of his arms is reaching forward like he's ready to punch. There are a few switch out options we'll talk about. And these arms are actually made up by Bone Crusher and Scavenger, a bulldozer and a backhoe. And while you don't see as much transformation in these 2 vehicles, it's still cool that they are actually assembled on top of it. And then as we're looking at Devastator's portrait here, he has the very classic Generation 1 Decepticon look. Almost reminds me a little bit of Starscream and watching the cartoons, but he's kind of maniacal and evil, and it really brings you back to that nostalgic childhood. And obviously with concept, let's talk about the size, because that's what this statue is about. This is massive. It's so massive, there was a lot of issues assembling it, which we're going to talk about in a second. But as you can see right here, I can't even turn it on my turntable. I think it might have broke my turntable, which is supposed to be labeled at 100 pounds. But I think the massive size and presence is a big pro for it because it's supposed to be 5 Transformers in one. Current biggest Transformer is probably Shockwave. This piece right here, you can actually check it out. This is from the Bayformer movies. And he's actually going to sit right next to him. So it'll be interesting to see what he scales like next to him. If you don't want to wait for the room tour, check out the Extreme Channel Instagram and Facebook page. The link for those is in the description below. I'll post photos on there before the room tour. But concept, It's Devastator. I like the size. I like how they incorporated all the 5 Decepticons. I like what he's doing, that he's not just in a museum pose. It makes him look a little more badass. I think it's a 5 out of 5 on the concept. Well done, Imaginarium Arts. Design. This is where I ran into a lot of problems. And the design is so complex on this, I can't even do the assembly for you guys today. So we've already done the assembly, and it's actually a video that's also going to launch in a few days that you definitely don't want to miss, because here it is right here. I actually had Mrs. X assemble it without instructions, and it is hilarious. Now, members of the Extreme channel have already seen an uncut raw version of that and how Mrs. X and I interact. If you're interested in that, you can actually hit the join button below. But let's look at a few different things here. First, let's look at the switch out options. There's 2 different portraits. So this first portrait right here is kind of what I call his robot portrait. This portrait right here really looks more like a robot, and this is what I'm talking about. Here's the other one. It's a little bit more smooth. They're very close, same expression. I think they should have changed up the expression. Otherwise, they're too close together, but I like the humanoid version one a little bit more. I think it's more Generation 1 true. But they also have a light-up feature in both portraits as well. It's not easy to access the light-up feature, so that's a huge disadvantage, but I don't plan on using it. It does take batteries that they didn't include on a $3,000 statue, which sucks. And then his left hand, he can have a fist, or he can have that huge badass gun, which I greatly prefer, but it also makes me worry about the stability of it. And the badass gun also has a light-up feature right here. Let's also get the size. So a little difficult to tell what's the front exactly, but I'm going to say the deepest part of this is probably 36 inches, maybe a little bit more, depending what angle you're at. The widest point, you are probably looking at 28 on the base. However, you got to keep in mind the gun sticks out farther, and same thing with the depth. So his arm goes out quite a bit further. And then the tallest point is going to be a few different options here. Tallest point is near 45 inches or so. For exact dimensions, I check out Imaginarium Arts website or Spec Fiction. That's where I actually bought this from, Spec Fiction. Now, I actually don't have it fully assembled because the keys wouldn't sit in properly. If you want to see what that's like, again, check out that assembly video in a few days. Some of these parts are very, very cheap. Now, it makes sense that some of them would be made out of plastic or a lighter material simply for the fact that you don't want it falling down or bending over, because I think the weight alone, it's definitely over 100 pounds. I know the box weight together for them was about 130 or 140. However, also during the assembly, you'll see there were parts actually flaking off, and some of that we actually edited out because the assembly took quite a while. But as you put other pieces together, another piece would fall off. So it seems to me very cheap quality on this. And the design isn't so good either. When we put, I believe it was the right arm on, the whole thing almost fell over. So I'm very nervous to move this. So obviously, even if the turntable would work, I tried it and it couldn't even push it, I wouldn't have this spin around for you guys like I normally do, because I honestly feel like it might fall apart. However, during the paint and sculpt of this, we will look at the front and the back. So with all those design issues, you know, I do want to give them props because they did go above and beyond. They went really elaborate. The more elaborate you go, the harder it is to do. However, I still think there's some significant design issues, at least with mine. So I give it a 2 out of 5 on the design, unfortunately. Now, paint and sculpt, as you're looking at this piece, a lot of it looks cheap. Or is it supposed to look more Generation 1, more true to the original Decepticons that we grew up with in the comics and the cartoons? That's kind of left to be said. I think the answer is both of it. I think part of it's the art direction was geared towards that, but part of it is it's a little bit cheap. And here's what I'm talking about. All right, so for paint and sculpt, we'll actually start at the top here, which we normally don't do. Now, a lot of what we talk about, especially with paint, is going to be the same. It's just integrated in a different way because obviously you have so many different pieces. So they did a lot going on, obviously, with the green and the purple, the classic Devastator colors, and then the blacks and grays and other dark colors mixed in there for the machinery, like, you know, the bulldozer or the backhoe over here. But let's start with Devastator's head. Now this is a little bit lighter color silver. The sculpt is okay on this. It's very remedial, but it's almost like they're channeling that original cartoon Generation 1 Transformer, so I don't mind it. It doesn't have the detail that the Prime 1 pieces have. And typically Imaginarium Arts, from what I've seen in pictures, they do not. As I said, this is my first piece. I'm not really seeing a lot of places for improvement other than if they went to a more modernized or detailed head. With that being said, this does have more of the humanoid head compared to the other one we looked at, which I thought I'd like that one better, but I do not. Now, as you go through the machinery, I like a lot of what they did. It does look like toys, but again, that's channeling that original Generation 1, so I don't mind that as much. So you do see some basic aspects, especially when you get into the machinery, like the mirrors kind of glued to the window. It's not going to be that really fancy detailed, and if that's what you want, you probably will never find that in a statue this big. But I think they did a nice job with the shading of the battle damage throughout, whether it's just some light black shading on the green or these burnt rustic edges, which is neat. Because it really flows that if you had construction equipment or the Decepticons were masquerading as construction equipment, they wouldn't be sparkling clean all the time. So it really makes sense. One thing is, I don't like the purple on the windows. I wish that it would have been some type of translucent resin or semi-translucent resin, which may not have looked as cool, but it would have had that more realistic tone. And like I said, I just don't believe that's what they were going in here with the art direction. Little tiny Decepticon symbol there, and you do see it in other places, like I think on the mixer. I thought you did. Somewhere. There's too many places to see. But so back to the top here, some of the circuitry you can see in between the different machines, the treads, and then even these tires that are all over, they look very plasticky, but again, like I said, I don't mind that as much. So I think there's just enough detail to make it look good, but not an extreme amount that you'd expect, especially in a statue that is this size and this price, because typically the bigger you can get on a statue, the more detail they can get in there. Now the paint job itself, as far as execution, it's decently clean. I don't see a lot of bleed over or mixing, so I don't think they did a horrible job with that with such a large piece of paint. I would be interested to see the variations between the different pieces. Now even his gun here looks pretty cool. I like the design of that. The way he's holding it is a little awkward, but that's not really paint or sculpt. And I'm a little scared to move him around, so we'll move him around here at the bottom though. But even like the ladders here, very plasticky, which a lot of these parts, as we talked about, are plastic for weight purposes, but you can also do a little bit with paint to kind of cover that up. So you'll see different parts of circuitry, whether it's from the machines or the things that he transformed into. You don't see a ton of actual robot in this other than the form itself, which is something that's very different than a lot of the other Transformer pieces that I own. Very bulky, very square on all the different pieces, very segmented like that. Not sure if I like that or not. It's so funny, there's other than the different pieces itself, there's not really a lot of differences between what they did. They just did it in a different area and varied it a little bit. Let's look at the base here on the front before we turn it around. I like the base quite a lot actually, so it definitely looks like a construction site. Again, I don't know what that red broken pieces are tied to. Is that part of Optimus? Who knows? But I think they did a nice job with the mud and the dirt and these pieces coming out, and you don't know what these pieces are. Are they part of a Cybertronian thing? Are they just part of a construction site? They look almost like a ship. Maybe he unburied something, something of that nature, and how the dirt bleeds over onto Devastator himself, I think is done really well. The rocks on the side are good. So I like the base a lot more than I thought I would, and a lot more than when I brought it out. Now we're going to carefully turn this, so if there's a loud crash. Here's more of the base on the back. Again, fantastic detail. And where I'm putting this, it's going to be a 360, so that's nice. You'll be able to see it from most angles. But here's kind of just some up the sides. Here's where you see some of the potential robot parts back here. But I like how even on the back you see more pieces. I think one of the things, and this was the concept we talked about, while the paint and sculpt may look a little toyish and plasticky, and part of it was meant to be that way, like look at the cables here, it really shows true transformation. How they, like you see in the cartoons and when you grow up, where you don't see that in the Michael Bay Transformers as much. Let me turn it again here. Pray to God. So here's, again, the 360 angle I think is incredibly important with this piece, because even looking at the back here is just as impressive as the front. Arguably even more impressive with a lot of the stuff you're seeing, especially with that transformation factor. So I am really impressed like this. This has been a pretty hard piece to really talk about the paint and sculpt, because it's so non-traditional and just overwhelming, honestly. The presence of this still is, even after I've had it open for a few days. So there's some of my thoughts. Let's get back together for a recap. So on the paint, let's start with that. I like it a lot more than I thought I would. The biggest issue are the windshields for me and the windows. So I think the paint's a 3 out of 5 overall. I still think they did a great job executing on such a large piece. Sculpt I'm really struggling with. If they were targeting Generation 1 and that's what they wanted to make it look like, I think the sculpt's probably a 3 out of 5. So I'm okay with it. It's good, but it's nothing amazing. If they weren't and things just ended up looking cheap, then it's probably a 2 out of 5 on the sculpt of this piece. You know, and it's interesting that this is getting some lower scores, so that makes you really wonder, is this worth the $3,000? So it's about $3,000 with shipping. As you can see, huge, large boxes. I think most retailers like Big Bad Toy Store and Spec Fiction actually just threw it out with shipping included. So I'm not sure what the original retail is, but I guess it's around like $2,200 or $2,500. But I believe they only made 100 of these, and I don't remember looking at the bottom of the base, but I'm pretty sure the edition size was only 100. For arguably the only Devastator in this size that will ever be made. That's going to be a sought-after piece despite some of the design or paint or sculpt issues that I see in this piece, and some people may disagree with me as well. There's a lot of subjectivity when it comes to art and collecting. So I still think the value is pretty good. You know, big Transformer pieces, whether it's from XM Studios or Prime 1 Studios, are all retailing for $2,000 plus nowadays, it seems like. So this one being at $3,000 and only 100 ES of an awesome character that's highly sought after, and the presence does have that wow factor, I still think the value's a 4 out of 5, believe it or not, despite those issues that it had. Does the statue have the X factor? I want to explain the X factor again. I do many times. It's not a cumulative score. It's like, does this have the best paint? Does it have the best sculpt? Clearly it doesn't. The X factor, is this a wow statue? And size plays a big role in that. Not the biggest role by any means, but it does play a big role. So I honestly think this has the X factor. It's a 5 out of 5 on the wow scale. It doesn't mean that the paint and sculpt are amazing or that there aren't issues with it, but it means that I guarantee when I put him over where he's going to be displayed, if someone tours the collection, he will be one they're drawn to and just stare at with all the intricate parts and everything they did with him. Very impressed. To win this Goro statue, first thing you got to do is make sure you've liked this video, you've actually subscribed to the channel, and you've hit that bell notification. Second thing is leave a comment below and make sure it's a witty, entertaining, or funny comment. Because when we hit 20,000 subscribers, I'm going to pick a random video, and the comment that has the most likes on it will be the winner of this Goro statue. So make sure your comment is entertaining to others and entertaining to Mr. X. Because if I like it, I'm actually going to pin it to the tops to help you get more likes. So thanks for tuning in, guys, today for the unconventional review. Really appreciate it. Make sure you not only hit that like button, but you hit that Mr. X logo and you check out some of these other pieces from Prime 1 Studios. Talk to you later. Take care.